Welcome to the third episode in the series of discussion on wearable technology in vital signs monitoring. The advancement in wearable technology for vital signs monitoring, including metrics like pulse rate, ECG, oxygen saturation, respiratory rate, blood glucose level, all these have revolutionized remote patient monitoring outside traditional hospital settings. Wearable devices have become integral in managing patients post-discharge, including those in elderly care facilities and individuals with chronic conditions like diabetes, COPD, etc. How to set it up, which we discussed in the previous episode. In today's episode, we will explore the current challenges and considerations in the use of wearable devices in continuous vital signs monitoring in a hospital setting, in patients admitted in a hospital. There is a growing trend among device manufacturers to extend the use of wearables to monitor patients within hospital settings. This shift raises significant considerations and challenges that must be addressed before widespread adoption can be deemed appropriate. Let us explore what are the challenges and considerations. Number one is, what is a necessity for continuous vital signs monitoring in patients admitted in a hospital? Definitely yes, patients in the intensive care unit need continuous vital signs monitoring, and they receive continuous vital signs monitoring using clinical grade devices because of the critical nature of the conditions. They need that. However, all the patients admitted in general wards, rooms, in a non-critical area, the necessity of continuous vital signs monitoring using wearable devices is debatable, or whether they need continuous vital signs monitoring itself is debatable. Studies and various review articles have suggested that continuous vital signs monitoring may not always provide significant clinical benefit for non-critical patients when you do a cost-benefit analysis. So first of all, there is no need or there is no evidence to show that all the patients admitted in a hospital need continuous vital signs monitoring, whether it is using wearable devices or non-wearable conventional devices. So first of all, there is no need for that. There is no indication for that. Second, when we use wearable devices in a critical patients in an in-hospital setting, in a clinical setting, what is the reliability of the monitoring devices? The reliability of the devices, the accuracy of the wearable devices, particularly in measuring blood pressure, this needs validation for clinical use. Inaccurate readings can lead to improper clinical decisions, especially in critical patients and patient management. Number three is data monitoring and response mechanism. When we implement a 24/7, 365 days continuous vital signs monitoring using a wearable device, it generates a large amount of data. So when we generate a critical data, some setup has to be there to analyze this data and implement or take actions based on this data. So the essential requirement when somebody tries to start a monitoring in a hospital is to have a centralized command center. A command center means a room which is full of monitors, TVs, which shows all the vital signs parameters being monitored using wearable devices in the hospital. And in the command center, there are privileged people who are trained enough to look at this data, and there should be systems in place to take appropriate actions based on this data. If something is abnormal, there has to be a protocol and a system in place so that immediate action can be taken based on that. So the first step, if at all, any hospital is trying to use wearables for continuous vital signs monitoring, is to have an in-house, fully equipped command center with people privileged to monitor and take action based on that. And that should be available 24/7. The fourth issue is regarding the issue of connectivity and communication issues. Wearable devices often rely on technology like wireless technologies, Bluetooth, or cellular networks. Connectivity issues can result in data transmission errors and loss, and definitely lead to false alarms. This needs robust backup systems and protocols in place to identify and differentiate between false alarms. Because when you monitor a large number of patients who are non-critical, the number of false alarms versus true alarms will be significant. Vast majority of the alarms raised will definitely be false alarms. Now, fifth is data security and privacy. These are all critical patient data, and this has to be privacy of this data, the protection of this data. Somebody logs into this server and manipulates the data, it can be disastrous. There has to be clear policies and protocols for ensuring the security and privacy of the patient data collected through wearable devices. Because companies want these data, this is valuable data for research purposes. Compliance with healthcare regulations such as HIPAA is crucial to protect patient confidentiality. Number 6, cost consideration. When you monitor a patient in a ward, in a room, with a continuous vital signs monitor wearable device, the cost of that is approximately, if in India it will be around 1,500 plus or around 2,000 rupees per patient per day. That is almost equivalent to the per day salary of a nurse or even a junior doctor. If you have 400 patients in a hospital, and if all these patients are being monitored, wouldn't it be cost effective to employ 400 more nurses or use a wearable device just to monitor the vital signs? And on top of that, one need a command center and personnel to review the data. 7th, the most important thing is lack of clinical evidence. Despite the growing popularity of wearable device, there is a lack of robust clinical evidence demonstrating the necessity and efficacy of continuous monitoring for all hospitalized patients. Evidence-based practices should guide decision-making. So just because it looks like an attractive proposition doesn't mean that it can be implemented in patients. Vital signs monitoring is vital. That means it's one of the crucial clinical monitoring parameter for a patient, vital signs monitoring. So when you are doing that in a patient, there has to be robust evidence. It has to be guided by evidence. 8 is medicolegal implications. The introduction of remote monitoring technologies raises complex medicolegal questions. Clear protocols are needed to define liability in case of device malfunctions, misinterpreted data, or adverse events related to monitoring. For example, if an untoward event happens in a hospital in a patient who is undergoing vital signs monitoring using a wearable device, and there was a device malfunction or some data error because of transmission loss or some abnormality because related to the device, who is responsible for that? Is it the hospital which is implemented that device, or is it the nurse who is in charge of that patient, or is it the command center personnel who is monitoring the data, or is it ultimately the doctor who is responsible, under whom the patient is admitted, or finally is it the company who has made the device? So this is akin to the debate which happened with the introduction of driverless cars. Imagine a situation, somebody has purchased a driverless car. He is sitting in the back seat and goes on a ride in a driverless car, and there is nobody in the driver's seat. Unfortunately, the car hits against a pedestrian. The pedestrian suffers a fracture of the leg, and he sues against the owner of the car. And the argument goes like this: who is responsible? Is it the company who made the car, or is it the owner of the car, or is actually the person who is sitting in the car? He may not be the owner of the car. Ultimately, it was shown by the court that it is a company who made the car who is responsible for that, because the person purchased the car under the belief that such things will not happen. So similarly, when a wearable device is purchased or employed or used in a hospital, it is under the presumption that there will not be a device malfunction, there will not be a communication error, there will not be a false alarm which will affect the patient care. So is the company responsible for this? Because there is always a question of vicarious responsibility. Ultimately, the doctor becomes responsible for whatever happens to the patient because he has to oversee the quality of vital signs monitoring. Number 9 is the problem with false alarms. When you monitor patients who are actually not indicated for monitoring, like now the patients admitted in a hospital in the general ward without any critical problems, if continuous vital signs monitoring is employed, the number of false alarms raised because of so many reasons. The patient would have pulled out the sensor, the patient would have gone to the bathroom, the patient wire has come out, the temperature is so low so that now the sensor is not working, Wi-Fi connection because the patient has gone into the bathroom and closed the door, so the sensor is not working or the connection is disabled. So this all raises false alarm. But for the person sitting in the command center, a flat line on the monitor means cardiac arrest. So just imagine a situation where he gets an alarm of cardiac arrest or a flat line 100 times, and if 95% or 99% of the time it is just a device malfunction or a device error, and it's only one time it is an actual cardiac arrest. But the problem is, all these 100 times, there has to be a system in place, a cord blue has to be activated and immediately has to be acted upon. So that is the problem with false alarm. So the false alarm fatigue, every now and then false alarms get activated. Imagine in a hospital where 400 patients are monitored, the number of false alarms will be enormous. So the whole infrastructure, the people, the personnel will have to act upon these false alarms, because once the data is generated, once the alarm is generated, raised, naturally you have to act on that. Unless you act on that, you will never know whether it is a true alarm or a false alarm. And last but not the least, the need for infrastructure and manpower requirement. Contrary to what is perceived and believed, a wearable device continuous vital signs monitoring requires more manpower, because you have to have a command center which needs quite a lot of investment. You need people sitting in the extra people, because these are people not working in the ward, these are not nurses, or these are healthcare professionals who are not doing any other job other than to sit in the centralized room, command center, and monitor all these. Because then that is a very, very demanding job. You have to look at 400 odd monitors and very closely monitor. Even though AI algorithms might be in place, how can you rely on AI algorithms 100% for vital signs monitoring? And last but not the least, this takes away the human touch. When a nurse goes to the patient every 4 hours or 6 hours and checks the BP, it's not only checking the vital signs. It is that reassurance from the side of the healthcare professional. It is that opportunity to interact with this patient, get to know how he is outside the realm of vital signs, and if there is a problem, immediately it will be acted upon. And it is quite reassuring for the patient also to know that his vital signs are normal, which is lacking when there is a remote monitoring using wearable device in a hospital. Whereas in a remote monitoring from a remote location like from the home, it is reassuring for the patient, because at least they have a feeling that I am being monitored by somebody else remotely. In conclusion, the current evidence does not support the routine implementation of continuous vital signs monitoring using wearable devices for patients admitted to hospitals, particularly those in non-critical settings. In critical settings, there is clinical grade monitoring devices in place, and that is happening. So replacing those with devices which are not standardized for clinical grade monitoring is not recommended. While wearable technology has demonstrated value in remote patient monitoring outside hospital settings, its application within hospital environments requires further validation and consideration. Thank you. See you next time with another episode of The Healthcare Futurist. Thank you.